Welcome to the New York Business Leaders Podcast, presented by the Coyle Group. We interview the most interesting and influential business leaders in New York and hear their stories of success, challenges, and lessons learned while building their businesses and personal brands. New episodes drop weekly, so please be sure to subscribe to get updates in your favorite stream. Without further delay, here's your host of the New York Business Leaders Podcast, Gordon Coyle.
Welcome back to the New York Business Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Gordon Coyle. Today I sit down with Ed Perry from the Beacon Agency, a digital marketing firm, and we get a deep dive on several digital ideas and issues around marketing. I am currently working with Ed on a website redesign, and what I can tell you personally is that he's really delivering on the strategy, which we talk about during the show. Strategy, strategy, strategy. All your decisions around digital marketing need to be underpinned by strategy, and hopefully a holistic, thoughtful strategy at that. There are so many things to talk about, and we really only scratch the surface here with websites, content marketing, video, Google My Business, social networks, etc. We also touch on the expert economy and why the days of commodity selling are over. Ed also tells us about his digital nomad experience over the last couple of years and how he's worked from his RV while traveling around the country visiting the national parks, which for those of you who know me is a big passion of mine as well. So I admire Ed's ability to put his office on wheels and go wherever he wants. If you'd like to have an expert take a look at what you're doing digitally and get a second opinion, reach out to Ed by emailing him at ed@beaconagency.net. Now, before we get into the conversation, let me say if you have an interesting story that you'd like to tell on this show, why not reach out to me, Gordon Coyle, and let's chat. My email address is gbcoyle@thecoylegroup.com, and my direct dial is 845-474-2924. Thanks for watching or listening, and please be sure to leave us a positive review or a thumbs up. Would really appreciate it. Thanks. Now, on to the show. Ed Perry, welcome to the New York Business Leaders Podcast. How you doing?
Thanks, Gordon. Great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, glad to have you. So I like to start off the show by asking our guests to introduce themselves and spend a couple of minutes to tell the audience what you do and what you really enjoy doing and how you help your clients. So why don't you start there?
Sure. Happy to do so. So my name is Edward Perry. I'm the president of the Beacon Agency. We're a marketing, advertising, and technology consulting agency that's based in Houston, Texas. I've been around. I am a full-time digital nomad. I am an RVer, and I've been full-time RVing for going on 4 years now. I'm currently up in New England for the summer, visiting my family up here. And actually, this picture was from the last campground I was at up in New Hampshire. I always try to keep my virtual backgrounds up to date with where I've been in my travels recently. But I've been traveling around for about 4 years, and my current goal is to try and see all the national parks. So I'm really blessed that when I started the Beacon Agency, we started as an online only agency. You know, everybody works from home, fully remote, everything's in the cloud. And so when the pandemic hit, we were really lucky and well positioned to be able to just keep doing what we do. And because of that, I've been able to help a lot of other businesses do it as well. A lot of people that are now trying to transition into remote work or into cloud-based work and things like that. And we've been able to help a lot of businesses really do some great things with that. So it's given me the ability to be wherever I want to be, which is typically somewhere where it's about 72 degrees. And I just try to, it gets too hot, I start to go north. It gets too cold, I start to go south. I typically spend a lot of time in Texas visiting my family there, and that's, home base in Houston, and then my family has a ranch in Austin. I also spend a lot of time in New England. I have a brother that lives up here and a nephew, and then my parents have a summer place up here, so I come up to Cape Cod and New Hampshire and those areas a lot in summer as well. And I went to school in Florida at the University of Miami, and so I typically can be found down there during fall because football games. So.
Not a bad life. I'll tell you, most people, they just have to turn the thermostat up and down. You have to take your office and just get moving.
That's right. I just changed the area codes. Yep.
So today I'd like to talk about, so in the interest of full disclosure, Ed is helping me expand a lot of my ideas and work in digital. He's redoing our website. We're about 30 days from launching that, fingers crossed, hopefully. I'll say as a customer, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it because you're trying to get your message out. We're going to talk about websites and the value that they bring to your business in just a minute. But I think that having an expert like Ed, working with somebody like him, for me, has broadened my mindset on what digital marketing is all about and all the opportunities that exist for a small business, small or medium-sized business in the digital world that I know a lot of business owners don't really focus on. So we're going to get into some of that. So why don't we start the conversation around websites and where you're seeing an inflection point, during the pandemic or post-pandemic, and how digital habits changed and why there's a better, more required emphasis in that area for business owners.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we know, a lot of things changed when the pandemic started. For marketers, things got really crazy really quickly for us because, digital behavior in general just had the biggest shift that it's ever had. I mean, the only thing even remotely this close to as big of a change and shift was the things that happened after 9/11. But I mean, this was magnitudes bigger because everyone had to stay home. And not only that, but they had nothing to do. So they were spending enormous amounts of time that would normally be spent on other activities on their phone, on social media, using over-the-top streaming services, things like Netflix, Roku, all of that stuff, using their computers, online shopping. Everything had switched to online. And the businesses who weren't online were really like, we better do something. And the ones who kind of decided, well, let's, it's only going to be 2 weeks. Remember when they told us that 2 weeks to flatten the curve? Remember that? So
yeah,
those businesses that were like, oh, it's only 2 weeks, we'll be fine, and didn't do anything and didn't make changes were the ones that really ended up struggling, and some of them ultimately failing. The ones who were doing business online and the ones who switched to doing business online quickly were the ones who were, in some cases, really able to thrive and, or at least survive until things get somewhat back to normal. So, it's this huge shift in online behavior. Everyone is now spending enormous amounts of time on their devices. And, we look at reports every month with some of our clients, and usually I'm able to explain things pretty well. Like, yeah, so this happened because of this. There was an algorithm changed by Google here, and that kind of shuffled the deck a little bit there. And I can kind of explain the peaks and the valleys that happen in digital marketing. Because for the most part, a lot of what we do is the long range. It's not the little bumps on the hills. It's looking at the big picture and the overall trends. But then the pandemic hit, and we're looking at reports for March, April, and May, and June, and it's just, things I just literally can't explain. Why all of a sudden this one blog that was 3 years old talking about something random about how to make a household cleaner product just became your most popular blog post of all time by over 1 million views. Just crazy things like that would just happen, and I couldn't explain it other than pandemic. And so what we saw overall was this huge shift in importance of the website. A lot of people so there was a couple of different waves of what we saw as an agency of what the clients needed. And the first immediate wave, right when the pandemic really hit, so we're talking like March, April, May, into the summer. The first wave was really like, we just need a way to keep doing what we do, but online-ish. So it was a lot of help us figure out how to do Zoom, help us figure out how to get documents signed, like DocuSign, things like that. It was a lot of training. It was a lot of teaching and helping people understand you can still do business online. After that, it turned into a second wave where people, I think, started to really realize that this isn't going away as quickly as maybe we thought, or maybe ever. So we should probably fundamentally shift the way that we do business. So then we saw a lot of people who had also financially stabilized a bit after the initial hit of the pandemic that were now looking to spend, money on bigger projects, things like new websites, huge upgrades to the websites, Websites that were content heavy were looking to do big optimization projects on speed, because now they were just losing users because people were getting more and more impatient, and page load times became super important. So then it was like a kind of this just wave of big projects. After that, it turned more into, okay, this is definitely not going away. So we need to now look at our fundamental, like, core marketing principles and shift the way that we do things. So it became a lot more strategy. A lot of people coming to us looking to say, hey, can we just do a full marketing communication strategy with you and figure out, because one, we either never had to market, people just walked in the door and showed up and we were fine, or two, we always just had enough, of that kind of traffic, or enough people coming to our website, or enough people coming through social media that we were fine, or three, like, we had to close our sticks and bricks business storefront completely, and we can only do business online, and we don't even really have a website, and it's like we don't even know what to do with digital marketing. So it was kind of this broad spectrum of needs, but they were all mostly like, we need a strategy now because things have changed. And that was about the time where I started to, like, kind of look back at what was going on and put the pieces together, and I was like, wow, this really is like, everything has changed. And businesses that would have never sought out an agency looking for a marketing strategy were now banging on our door being like, hey, can you help us, please? And so obviously, we're very thankful. We were very well positioned to be able to keep doing what we do. We got a lot of new business. And honestly, I'm thankful because as an agency that specializes in small business, we want to help small businesses, and helping numerous businesses adapt and thrive through the pandemic is something that I'm super proud of. Our team did a great job of really kicking it into overdrive when people needed us multiple times and going way above and beyond. And so it was really nice to be able to really help and see that, not just in the yeah, we help people, but like really like we help keep the lights on for some people. And that was great. And it was really, helps remind you why you do what you do. So, but there's a lot there, so I guess to pause for a second.
So remind me, like, the mix of business that you work with. Is it e-com, or is it professional services? I'm sure it's a little bit of everything, but what drives most of your business?
Yeah, so we are mostly, like, local businesses that rely on Google Maps, people that are searching for things in their local area. So that would be things like restaurants, doctors' offices, things like that. And then also anybody who sells anything online. And a lot of people just think, oh, you sell online, that's e-commerce, but it can be a lot of other things too. People who sell services online. So like your company, for example, you're not selling physical products on a store, but you are selling a service that you do. And you're trying to get people to take an action to contact you and set up a meeting so that you can talk to them. So that's technically selling online. Okay. And so we help a lot of different types of businesses. We're kind of all over the place industry wise, but it's either people who are looking for digital marketing to help get local eyeballs, or it's people who are looking to do something online, sell something online, whether it's a product, a service, they have a store, they're selling consulting, they're selling digital products, ebooks, photography, any number of different things. But if it's something that you can buy, ship, download, or, get over a Zoom call, we basically help people sell more of that.
And I guess, with the process that you have been working me through, it's not more, but it's foundational in the strategic thinking of it versus just, executing in order to fix something on a website. And for me, and for people that are in, whether it's selling insurance or consulting or any kind of business practice, your universe of customers or clients is, in the traditional world, is limited to your geography and to your network. And what I'm finding through digital is that my marketing territory now is, 48 states in the United States of America. I mean, sure, we could do business in Hawaii and Alaska as well, but so 50 states, let's just call it that. And we do get calls from all over the country because they're on our website, they're on our YouTube channel, they've heard something or read something or heard me speak about something, and they want more information. But I think that's a big mind shift for a lot of people that for years and years, for their whole career maybe, have operated in just their local environment. So now think, oh, I could get customers in Texas or Massachusetts or California or wherever. It's a big shift.
Absolutely. And I think the Coyle Group is a great example of the type of business that, is really looking at what has gone on over the last couple of years now, and like looking at a huge shift in how you market, because like you just said, you went from kind of being a, regional company to being a United States company, anywhere in the continental US, basically, including, Hawaii and Alaska. So that is a huge shift in what you have done in the past. It's a huge shift in where you spend your marketing dollars. It's a huge shift in priorities and where you put your time, because obviously you, Gordon, have only so much time you can put towards marketing, and the things that you need to be able to pay attention to, whether that's your podcast or blogs or, any number of other things that you're working on. Plus you still have clients you have to handle, right? So it's like, how do I split up my attention and where is the value now? Because that's all changed for you and for a lot of people, right? So.
And to be honest, I haven't totally figured that out.
and that's cool because, as you know, it's a process, right? And so one of the things that we really try to make a focus is having long-term strategy behind what we do, because a lot of people get involved with marketing where you're just, it's like shiny key syndrome. You're just chasing the latest flash in the pan thing that you heard about or that you read about online, and just, so I think if I go make a couple of TikToks, like that's going to bring in some leads. Or, like, I heard if I put extra keywords in my blog post, that means more people are going to find it in Google. And you just start doing these random things that don't really have any sort of connection to each other. And then you end up just kind of chasing your tail because, maybe you get a little bit of a bump here and a little bit of a bump there, but there's no consistent growth. And that's what we're always trying to focus on, is looking at the big picture. Like, yes, we do micro reporting on things, and you always have the ability, using the tools that we report with, to like scale it down to the smallest increment of a single day if you want to. And sometimes we need to look at what happened on one day that we published one thing. But for the most part, we're looking at overall trends. And that's why a lot of what we do is based on relationships and not necessarily on just one-off projects. Not to say that we won't help somebody if they just need a one-off project, and we do a good bit of that for sure, but it's always our preference to have these longer-term relationships that are based on strategy projects, starting with those and then going into marketing projects. Because sometimes people come to us and they're like, yeah, I need a website. And we're like, okay, but what do you really need? Like, is it leads? Is it to tell people what you do? Is it to sell a thing online? Like, and so then we need to figure out from there what the strategy is behind that website before we just jump into building something that's pretty. Because sure, I can just build you a website right now. I'll make it the prettiest, funnest looking website that you've ever seen in your life, and it'll have all the bells and whistles, but that doesn't mean that your intended audience is necessarily going to want to buy from it. Because if there's no strategy behind it, you're just, making a thing.
So I have SOS, which is shiny object syndrome. And I'll just kind of add to what Ed was saying, and that is that I will often say, oh, well, let me try this. And I think there's some good attributes in trying things here and there.
Absolutely.
But I think for what a lot of people, what happens to them, like you said, I'm going to try a couple of TikToks, or I'm going to add these hashtags or keywords. And then they don't get a bump. And they're like, oh, that's crap. That's not going to work. I'm not trying that again. And the one thing that I have learned through my digital marketing journey, if you will, is that you have to keep trying and you have to be consistent. Not necessarily consistent with things that don't work, but when you find that you are hitting a trend, you have to stick with that consistently. Because whether you're talking about Google or YouTube or Instagram or whatever the platform is, the quote unquote algorithm, which is kind of like a black box to everybody, the one thing for sure that I think we do know about the algorithms is that they reward consistency. So that's my little 2 cents
and
conversation.
And we've had that conversation too, right? Like it's not about like, can you make the greatest blog post ever? It's, can you make a blog post every week or every month or every whatever and do it consistently? Because that's hard. And as you know from doing a podcast, like being consistent with the podcast is absolutely the hardest part, because it's real easy to just let life get in the way of doing that recording or reviewing that edit or whatever. And then before you know it, you missed a week, you missed 2 weeks, and then it's been a month, and now all of a sudden you've fallen off, right? And so guys like like I'll use an example of one of my favorite marketing podcasts is Mike Stelzner's Social Media Examiner podcast. Like, he has been on the air every week for something like 300 something episodes now.
Wow.
Like nonstop every week without fail. And that's, I mean, even if those were all crap, just the fact that he did that is amazing, but they're actually really amazing interviews. And if you haven't ever checked it out, I highly recommend it. But, it's just to think about that. That's incredible to be able to do something with that consistency. And that's why his company is as big as it is. And that's why his, social media conference is as big as it is, because the guy is just a machine. And, Gordon, I think that's one of your greatest attributes, right? Is like your ability to just turn out content and do it on a regular basis. And you're really great at that. And that makes my job as a marketer so much easier, because I don't ever have to wait for you to give me the content. It's ready to go. And I love that. And, like one of the things that we also stress is being nimble, because, like you said a little bit ago, there is some good attributes to trying things and testing, and we're always into testing new things. But if it's testing with no strategy and no measurement, then you're just, doing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that's not really a great way to spend your marketing dollars. But if it's strategic and you have a plan and you know how you're going to measure it and how long you're going to do it for, and it's got to be at least a little while because things don't happen immediately, then you're really, you're doing strategy rather than just, SOS, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So
the one thing I'll also add to that is that, a lot of my friends that are either in the insurance business or in other industries, and they'll say, oh, man, I just can't believe how much content you're pumping out. That's amazing. You must have a whole team of people. And the truth is that it's me, it's you, it's a marketing assistant that works 20 hours a week for me. That's been very, very helpful. I mean, that's like, if there's any advice I could give anybody, is get yourself a VA, a virtual assistant that can do all the behind the scenes stuff that's so time consuming and laborious. That's just not a lot of fun.
I couldn't agree more on that point.
Yeah. But the one thing that I tell people is, like, when they say, well, I don't know what to talk about, I don't have anything interesting to say, and my business is boring or whatever. And I'm like, dude, like the insurance business, there's nothing more boring than the insurance business. No one wants to talk about it. No business owner wants to talk about it, but we find interesting things about it, and it's really driven by expertise. And I think that there's a whole expertise economy that goes on, and that's rewarded for putting out expert commentary. And you don't need to have 40 years in the business like I do. If you have 4 or 5 years in the business, you've developed expertise in whatever you do. And that's what your focal point should be. I mean, I don't want to be preaching to the choir here, but I'd like your comments on this kind of expertise marketing thing that I think is so valuable for a lot of people in the service industry business that aren't selling physical products.
Yeah, I think a lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome, especially when you're first starting out in your business and you're like, man, I don't have any, it's not okay for me to be talking about this and that. There's so many people who are doing this for longer or better at it. Or what if I say something wrong and people are going to call me out on it? But you have to start somewhere, right? And I think that's an important thing, is like everybody who is a famous marketer, a famous YouTube personality or whatever started somewhere. And if you go all the way back to their first couple episodes, they were absolute trash. I promise you. And it's true. I mean, like, look at some of the most popular YouTube personalities. Like, look at Mr. Beast's like super old stuff, or look at Mark Roberman's super old stuff. And like, I mean, these are guys who have millions of subscribers, fans all over the world. And like, they started on their own, like with a webcam and a laptop.
Look at Gary Vaynerchuk and his early videos.
Half of the time, it's still just Gary on his phone, like he doesn't care.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just about doing it. You just have to start somewhere. And I think that's a very important thing. A lot of people get hung up on is like trying to get started. And I'm just as guilty of that as most. Like I've been trying to start a podcast forever. You know that, Gordon. Like I just keep putting it off, because it's that fear of getting started. And it feels funny to be sitting here talking about it now, knowing that I suffer from this exact same thing. But we all do. Especially when you're trying to run your own business and help other people's businesses. Like, the clients are always getting prioritized over the things I want to do. The cobbler's kids kind of scenario.
Say, the shoemaker's kids.
Shoemaker's children. So, and we suffer from that too. It's always hard for me to devote the time to our internal projects that we want to do and things that we want to do better and improve and things that I need to document better or whatever. But, it has to happen. And so that's an important piece of that puzzle. And I feel like we're getting way off topic of where your question was now, though. Remind me. Yeah, it's all good. But
I guess we were talking about what I asked you was about marketing your expertise.
Expertise.
I think you answered that.
Yeah, and the other thing too is you got to start somewhere, but then also you don't know everything, and that's okay, right? It's 100% okay to tell people, look, I don't know that. I've never had that experience. I've never run into that. But what I always do is always make sure I have somebody that I can refer people to that has, or if it's somebody on my team that I know has done that, say, you know what, let me get with my team and then I'll get back to you on that. And then I'll go meet with them and say, okay, explain this to me so that I can explain this better to the client.
Right.
That happened actually to me yesterday. I was on a strategy call with one of my social media clients and they wanted to talk about starting to do TikToks. And Gordon, as you know, I'm not a fan. I think that a lot of businesses are moving there. It's the fastest growing social media platform ever. As far as revenue goes. And so it's obviously very appealing for a lot of people right now. And I've been holding out, but like, I think the time has come because people are asking for it now. Right. So we got to start getting to it. But my response to her was, that's not really my thing. So let me get with the social media team and then I'll get back to you on that, because I don't want to tell you we should do this and have it be completely wrong, because I don't know that. I'm not on TikTok. I don't want to be on TikTok. So.
Right. Well, I can tell you that I recently did some research into TikTok and it's one huge time suck. It's like a vacuum. It'll just grab hold of you and you can't get out.
Yep.
But as you know, and a lot of the folks that are listening to this probably know, I do a lot of video. So I'm trying to find ways to take my content, which is averaging 5 to 8 minutes of video, which is long. I can be a bit verbose at times, especially around technical issues, and trying to skinny that down into very, very tiny bite-sized pieces. So short form video is something I'm working on. We've got 2 or 3 of them in the works just since last week. Ed, I haven't shared them with Ed yet, but I'll get his opinion on them soon.
Sure, they're great.
And I think what my attempt is just to take, like I said, these little bite-sized pieces and then hope that drives more activity to the long form content, to the written content, to the website, to the response pages and all those sorts of things. So, and I just find it interesting to kind of blend all of these tools together in a way that I sense will pay rewards. So
yeah,
we'll see.
And while I don't love TikTok, I do love short form video, especially as a consumer of short form video, because it gets the point across really quickly. But I think that's also what's really difficult about it is that, as you know, you have to be super concise. You don't have a lot of time to explain the situation or explain what you want to tell people. You really have to distill that idea down to its most simplest form and in its shortest form, the least amount of words possible, and say, okay, here it is, blah, 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 and then just lay it on the table. Because if you can't do it quickly, then it just doesn't work. It doesn't fit the content.
If you can't do it quickly, then it becomes long form.
Exactly. Then it goes back on YouTube.
Exactly. Well, I'm trying to get why is cyber insurance for your business important down to 30 seconds? That's a real challenge. So wish me luck on that one.
You can do it. I believe in you.
Yeah, thanks, man. So since we're on the topic of social, I know a platform that a lot of business owners aren't really talking about that you and I have talked about that we're working is Google My Business. So Why don't you spend a couple of minutes and tell us what that is if people don't know and why they should be using it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Google My Business, and they're always changing the name of it. I think they actually just changed the name of it again to something different now, or Google Places again, I think is what it's gone back to maybe. But essentially, it's the interface that you as a business owner can use to communicate things about your business to Google as a platform, so that Google can use that information as one of several data sources to potentially update the information that exists about you on their services. So that would include Google Search, Google Maps, things like that. Now, the reason I say potentially is because it's not a direct connection to Google. It's not like if you go in there and you just update something, it's 100% just going to go straight to Google and it's going to update on all their services, because Google hates to be wrong. So what they do is they pull data from a whole bunch of different sources and kind of take the average of that data, so that if there's outliers, they're not affected by those outliers and they're less likely to be wrong, because they're trying to do the best answers for the most amount of people all the time. And that's what their algorithm is all about. Now, you mentioned the algorithm earlier, and I think it's worth noting out or pointing to here that we don't know what the algorithm is, what it does, what it says. All we know is what Google tells us about it, because it's not something that's publicly available. So they'll publish updates, on the Google Webmaster blog and places like that, where they're like, hey, yeah, we changed it and this is different now. And we just have to take their word for it, do what they say, test it, and see what happens. Because it is this like mythical thing in the sky that decides where the websites go, and we're just trying to guess. And so we all talk about like, oh yeah, I'm a search expert. I'm like, oh, are you really now? Because like, I don't know how anybody can really be an expert in search these days, because I think it's like a full-time job just trying to understand what the algorithm changes are. And there's whole blogs dedicated to it. Some of the SEO blogs that I read are really good. Guys like Neil Patel are always trying to help us understand what's going on. But it's tough, man, because it's like this crazy, complicated supercomputer stuff. And it's just this whole ranking of like, well, it's got to have this many words and keywords and this and that and all these different things and signals that Google's looking for to say, yeah, this is the best website right here. But as you alluded to earlier, the thing that's most important is consistency, because it wants to know that you've been around for a while, you're a trusted source, you've got authority, you're putting out fresh content for Google all the time, which it loves. Fresh content is good content, and you're keeping your stuff updated. So along with that, going back to Google My Business now, you can actually make posts in Google My Business the same way that you can make posts in social media. Just like and I don't know if you remember this, Google tried to have this social media platform a way back called Google Plus, G Plus or whatever.
Yep.
And it was not terrible, honestly. Like, I kind of enjoyed it, but it just didn't get the traction. Google killed it like they do with most of their cool stuff. They sunsetted that whole program, but a lot of the tech that they used to build that kind of got moved into Google My Business. Because if you remember the very beginning of Google My Business, it was part of Google Plus.
Right.
And they said they kind of split that out, got rid of the social part, kept some of that, and the post part stayed. So that's where that comes from. So that's why now as a business, you can make posts, and those posts show up on Google Maps and under your listing on the right side when you show up in search and things like that. And it's something that I don't think a lot of people know exists. And it's a great way for local businesses, especially, to talk about things like holidays. And I'll give you an example. So we just had 4th of July. I'm here in New England. And of course, if you're in New England on the 4th of July, one of the things you absolutely got to do that weekend is get some seafood, right? So my family did a lobster boil. And looking online at a lot of the seafood places, they don't have anything about 4th of July, which is a big weekend for them. Usually they have specials, you can pre-order. There's things that are going on that they could tell you about that weekend that are going to be helpful. So I don't have to call and ask 5 places the same 3 questions. Do you have lobsters? How much are they? Do I have to pre-order them? Can't you just put that somewhere where we can see it? A blog post on your website is a great way to do that. If you've got a little banner or something at the top that you can say, hey, July 4th orders, click here and go to that blog post, so that you can answer everybody's questions. But taking that, kind of distilling it down in the 500 words or less, and then putting it on Google Places, or Google My Business, I should say, so that it shows up in your Maps listing, and I don't even have to go to your website. It's just making it easier for me as a consumer. And the thing that I'm always harping on with online selling, which that's a form of online selling there, is you're trying to get somebody online to come to you and buy, is make it frictionless, make it as easy as possible for them to get what they want. If in this situation, it's information so they can make a decision about which of the 3 seafood markets they're looking at they want to go to, make it easy and say, hey, lobsters are this much. We have this kind in stock. We have selects. We have the large ones, whatever. You can pre-order pickups from 10 to 4. We're open all day, whatever you need to say, put it right there, make it easy for me. And that's just going to make more people want to shop for you. So that's a big thing that I think a lot of people are missing out on, is the opportunity to just get messages like that out to the consumers. And, if you're a business owner and you're wishing you could just talk to your audience once in a while, this is how you do it. It's a great way to just be able to say, hey, 4th of July weekend's coming up. We're closed. Hope you have a wonderful weekend with your family, whatever. That's one post. Mother's Day comes up and you're selling something that's related to mothers. Do a post about it earlier. Like if you're a flower shop, do a Mother's Day thing a week or 2 in advance and say, hey, don't forget to get your Mother's Day flowers. We're accepting orders now and we can do delivery on these days. Like, just get that information out there so that people don't have to go looking for it and they don't have to call you. And that's going to decrease the workload on you. They're not going to have to call and ask questions that are just qualifying questions. If they're calling to buy, that's different, right? But as you know, a lot of people call just to qualify you as a vendor. They're calling to say, are you open? What are your hours? What's the cost? Do you have this thing? Is it in stock? Can I pre-order it? If you can get all of that out of the way without them having to pick up a phone and call you, especially if they're millennials, because they won't call you. But if you can get all that out of the way before they even have to talk to you, you just made it easier for them to buy, and you're looking better online, which, especially for the younger crowd, makes you a more attractive option to them. They don't want to have to talk to you. And honestly, it's more work for your staff to have to keep picking up the phone and not selling things, if those things could be answered online. So put it on your website first and foremost, but also put it on social media and put it in Google My Business so that it shows up on your maps listing. And that way you're just making it easier for everybody.
Now, I can hear some people that are watching or listening to this conversation saying, oh my God, like, what, Ed's out of his mind. I can't do all this kind of stuff. And like, I get that. But if you're willing to adapt to a more digital marketing strategy, I think that one of the things we have to talk about is that we're not talking about creating 4 or 5 distinct pieces of content. We're talking about taking one idea, whether it's Mother's Day flowers or lobsters for 4th of July, and creating that content essentially once that can be put on your website. Okay, you'll have to do a banner or some kind of a fancy button, but then it gets repeated. The same content gets reused, or the term is repurposed, on Google My Business. Then it could be put on your company's Facebook page and on your company's Instagram page. And if you are motivated and you feel like doing a video, which could be as simple as something as simple as on your cell phone, and then post it to YouTube, or even Reels or Shorts, or we were just talking about earlier, and I forgot the name of it. TikTok. Thank you. So you could take the one concept of lobster for 4th of July and redistribute the same essential piece of content in, I think I mentioned 7 places. And that's where the convergence of all this data, when done as well as possible, as accurately as possible, yields the greatest results. If you just do it once, okay, that's not bad, but do it 7 times, you're going to see a lot of effort kind of really going to oil that engine pretty well.
Exactly. And so a couple of things I want to unpack there. One is like, so how we do marketing schedules is we have this big spreadsheet that's a huge calendar split up by quarters, and then it has the first day of every week. So we know what's going to happen that week, and we do it kind of down to the week level. And at all the rows are all the marketing mediums, channels, whatever you want to call them, that we're going to be using with that particular client. And starting up at the very top, the first thing that we talk about is like what's going on. So holidays, things that affect your business, awareness days, special things that are, seasonal things that affect the business, whatever it may be, that's all up at the top. Then we go into what's going on with the company. So are there specific promos that we want to do? Are we, doing some sort of discount, or is there a sale, or Is there some holiday feature or whatever? Is there a new product launch? From there, we go into how are we marketing that? And so you can very easily do the same kind of thing. And if you just go online and look for, monthly marketing calendar template, you can find it. I mean, there's a million of them out there. I know Smartsheet publishes some great ones. But all you have to do is, find somebody on your team who is, younger. They don't necessarily have to be. I'm not trying to make, any of these age discrimination comments or anything, but typically somebody who's a little bit younger that wants to do more marketing and wants to get involved in your social media. Set them up with your social media accounts for your business and give them some ability to just create content for you. So, what I mean by that is, going off of what you said, right? Like, yes, write up the thing about going back to the seafood example again, write up the thing about the lobsters. But if you want to do one better and you want to get people like me to drive further to come to your store, don't just tell me about it, but just take a video as you're walking by, the seafood counter there with all the stuff that's all fresh in the ice. And then I see those scallops and I'm like, ooh, I need some of those scallops too. Those look really good, And so, telling me about it is one thing. I think that's the bare minimum that you need to be doing. But then if you can show me and you can make video, and again, like you said, it does not have to be complicated. You don't have to bring in video pros with lights and cameras and all this stuff. Like, you can get one of those little selfie lights. You can just use your cell phone. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I'm willing to bet you can find somebody who would love to do this stuff for you if you gave them some ability and some autonomy to do it, and then just let them go, tell them what you want. Make one of these spreadsheets so you can keep track of your ideas, because you need time to do these things. And if it's always on the fly, it looks messy. Give yourself time to plan it. We always try to do 2 months in advance with our clients. So this month, we're going to be talking the first week of July. We're having meetings about content to talk about what's going to be going on in September for them, because that gives us all of July to make it, August to get it approved, scheduled, and everything else, so that come September, it's already good, ready to go. We're not chasing tails on anything like that. So you don't have to be 2 months in advance. 1 month is fine, especially if it's just you and you're not working with an agency. But have a plan, know what you want to talk about, know the holidays that are coming up. What's the sale going to be? Figure it out in advance and publish that everywhere that you have available to you. Again, like you said, repurpose the content. Write it down one time, on a piece of paper, in an email or whatever. Give it to your marketing person or hire an agency like us and say, okay, here's the sale. And then we can publish that everywhere. We can take the video and we can repurpose that. We can make it shorts. We can make it long. We can put it on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We can turn it into social posts. We can turn it into a blog post. We can put a banner or a pop-up on the website. There are a million things that we can do with that one idea that can potentially drive revenue to your business. So it's about maximizing reach, not spending more time marketing in that situation.
Yep. The one thing I just want to kind of pick up on that I thought was really interesting in that conversation was, storytelling is critically important, but you can tell people something, but when you can show people something, it's even better. And I love the analogy or the conversation you just had with like somebody just scrolling through with their camera, doing a video, and here are the beautiful lobsters we've got for 4th of July. And then boom, there's scallops or whatever else that's in the case. I'm just thinking of like all the opportunities for somebody in a small shop that have the opportunity to cross-sell a product in addition to what they're focusing on.
Yeah.
It's an amazing idea.
And that's when you get to real marketing. It's not like just the sale, but how are you cross-selling, upselling, increasing your lifetime customer value, and doing all those things that we really want to do with our customers to like really maximize the benefit. Because as you know, it's far more expensive to get a new customer than it is to keep an existing one. So if we can increase the sale, if we can add more to the cart or get them to stay with you longer, or figure out ways to even better get them to refer you business, that's even better, right? So there's a lot of that for sure that goes into it.
And to just take the fish shop, lobster shop one step further, the customer walks in and they go to buy lobster, or they place the order online. Take it in 2 different steps. So they place the order online. Now you've got an opportunity to hit up that customer for a Google review, right? Mm-hmm. And if you make that easy and you maybe follow it up, and there are a lot of different tools and techniques to do this, but that Google review has a lot of juice to it when it comes to your search engine rankings, right?
Yep. And a lot of people, like, they they take the baby step or the toe in the water with social media, and they put up a thing that says follow us on Facebook, and it's like, but where? I don't want to go searching for you. Do you know how many people and businesses are on Facebook? So I mean, the first thing that you got to do is get yourself a social media handle, the little at whatever, that is easy to remember.
Yeah.
Ours is at Beacon Agency for everything. Like, I own Beacon Agency on everything I could come up with when we started the business.
Yep.
And things that we don't even use, I own Beacon Agency on, because that's us and that's how you find us, right? So distill it down too. Get rid of words like the, and, whatever. Just make it as simple as you can so that people know it's you. And then there's a tool that I use called Name Checker. It's name CHKR.com or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
You can find it if you search for it. But basically, you put whatever the name you're looking at into it, and it searches all the platforms. I mean, things like Tumblr and things you don't even think of, and it searches for your domains and everything, and tells you if it's available. And that, when you get all the check marks and none of the X's, then you're like, okay, this is a good one. Then you just go claim them all and make that your new handle for things that already exist, so that it's easy for people to find you. And just say, we're at social media, we're at Beacon Agency. And so if you go on any platform and you put that in, you're going to find us.
Mm-hmm.
We make it easy. Not to say that there are not other Beacon Agencies, and we get tagged as wrong Beacon Agencies all the time on social media. It's hilarious. There's one in Canada that is a really cool business, actually. The woman who runs it, it's like an entrepreneur, kind of a think tank and supporting thing for women entrepreneurs in Canada.
Huh.
And so we're constantly getting tagged in all this great work that we're doing with women entrepreneurs in Canada. And I'm like, I wish that I could take credit for this, but it's not us. There's another one that's in the UK, and they do like home automation stuff. And I don't even know why they're an agency, but we get tagged as them every once in a while by like building organizations and, construction companies in the UK. And I'm like, yeah, dude, not us.
Not us.
Sorry.
Interesting.
But that's my real estate. I own that, and I've owned it for like 10 plus years at this point. And so it took a long time to get to that point, but you got to start somewhere. So find a name that works. You might have to change it if you've got an existing one, and that's fine. You don't have to get rid of your social media pages. I'm not saying that. Don't do that. But you can change the username for it, and then find one that's short, makes it real easy, and then let people know how to find you. And then, you got to put content up. You got to show them what's going on. But with a little bit of work, you can do a lot to really get going on that. And you'll see once you get started, that's really not so bad. And you don't have to hire a full-time social media person. Usually, if you have somebody who already works for you in your small business that is interested in this and wants to take it on, you can kind of make it a half-time position, or even less than a half-time position, where it's just something they do once in a while when you need it, but it doesn't have to be a whole big thing. And then if you really want to get into it, call us, call an agency and have a meeting to see how they can help you. You got to understand that there's going to be some money you have to invest in that. And you have to be willing to see it through and do things for a while for it to be worth your while. But if you're ready to get serious about it, there's a lot that an agency can do to help you get back time, so that you're just making decisions and not having to do implementation.
I think you just hit on a good point that is important to really make clear, that if you want to go down the path of digital marketing, there's investments. There's investment of money, time, effort, talent, tools, and you have to have some brain space for the knowledge that you're going to have to kind of acquire. Even if you hire an agency like yours, the business owner needs to have a bit of mind space in order to kind of comprehend all of the new ways of doing business. Now, for a lot of business owners, that it may not be new. They may have been working in a digital environment for a while. So it may be second nature to some degree, but it's still going to take an investment of time, money, talent, all those kinds of things. But I think not doing it kind of shortchanges an enterprise, whether it's a company that sells a physical product, a disposable product, a consumable product, a service, or anything else. So I just kind of want to make that clear, that it's not just, you just snap your fingers and you're doing digital marketing. It does take a lot of investment in various areas of your business.
Yeah. And it's small wins, especially when you're getting started. You'll get a lead here, you'll get a buy there. Somebody will comment on something, be like, oh, hey, can I come buy this right now or whatever. And you'll get those little wins here and there. You got to remember those. And you got to understand that it does take time, and you'll start to see more and more, but it's not a direct correlation. It's not like for every dollar you put in, especially when you're first getting started, you're going to get $1 back in sales. Ideally, you want to get to that point where you're putting in $1 and you're getting back more than $1 in sales, but it takes a long time to get to that point, because then you got to be doing advertising because you need new eyeballs all the time. So, but you got to start somewhere, and just it's hard is not really a good excuse. And I don't mean that to be rude or whatever. And so, sometimes we have to have these hard conversations with clients. Like, I know it's hard. I know that making content for your website's hard. I know that writing blog posts is hard. And the hardest part is getting started. But if just because it's hard, it can't be an excuse not to do it. You have to be willing to put the time in. And that's where a lot of our relationships, where we first meet people that we find out they're not a good fit, is because like we start to talk about the amount of time that they're going to have to put into it to really do it. And it's either you do it or you pay us to do it. It's one or the other, right? All these things have to happen. And I don't care who does it, if it's my team or if it's your team, but somebody's got to do it. And there has to be an agreement on an efficient amount of time that can be done or that can be spent on it. So if you can't do that, then marketing is going to be really hard, because if it's constant delays, you're constantly missing deadlines, then the marketing doesn't get done. If you publish your 4th of July thing on July 6th, it doesn't matter, you missed that opportunity.
Gone by dead by then.
Yeah, I mean, everybody bought their lobsters and you probably didn't sell any because, you were too slow.
Yeah.
So, and that's obviously like a very obvious kind of example of that, but that's how it works, right? If you miss the opportunity, if you're too slow on the idea, you can, completely miss your window. Yeah. And so that's why you have to be efficient about it. You have to be willing to put the time in. You have to understand that it takes time, that these things don't just happen overnight, and be willing to be consistent. And that's the hardest part, I think.
So we've talked about digital marketing, Google My Business, social, websites, investments, all kinds of different things.
Strategy.
And I think that's really the underlying thing, that you've got to kind of have a strategic view of what your objective is and how you're going to get there. Mm-hmm. Did we miss anything that you wanted to kind of put into this conversation before we wrap up? Because I want to be respectful of your time.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate that. The other thing that goes into strategy that a lot of people don't think about, because it seems somewhat obvious, is audience. But one of the most useful things that you can do as a small business owner, if you really want to improve your marketing, is to sit down and figure out who your top, let's say, 3 audiences are. Because you might have a ton, like for you at the Coyle Group, you guys could have any number of different audiences that are based on the types of businesses, the different types of coverages that they need, the industries that they're in, the situations that they're in, the problems that they have, the budgets that they have. They all have different types of needs and things. And you have to be able to kind of separate them into some buckets, because marketing is about increasingly more and more about personalization. And if you say the same thing to every audience, none of them are going to be interested, because it doesn't really help any of them. So you really have to be more specific for each group of people that you serve. And you can't market to all of them, especially if you have a ton. If you've got 10 audiences, I mean, you can, but that's going to take a huge budget and a ton of time and a ton of effort. So really, you need to figure out who are the ones that we're not getting enough sales from, that we think we have the most potential for, and then focus on those. And then you really have to understand who they are. So the exercise would be to sit down and say, what do you know about these people? What do you call them, first of all? So like, trying to think of an example of a generic one, so we're not outing one of our customers, but like, so we work with an architecture firm, and one of the types of people that they work with are people who are doing renovations. Typically they're a younger crowd, millennial-esque. And then there's also another kind of very similar crowd that is doing full house builds. So one's just adding on, one is completely building a house from scratch, but they're both looking for basically the same thing. They also work with contractors, because they can sell plans to contractors. The contractors can use those plans to build houses for their customers. So that's a completely different audience. They also work with a lot of different material manufacturers to make the things that get put into not just the homes, but also into the interior design and the backyard designs that they do. So companies that make special lighting, companies that make special cabinetry, flooring, tile companies, all sorts of different vendors. So the message for the tile company is very, very different to the message that you would be sending to the millennial homeowners that are looking to add on a new room for the incoming baby that they're expecting, right? Like two very, very different messages. And if the stuff that you're putting out on all of your marketing channels is the same for everybody, you're not really going to get anyone, it's just generic.
Yeah.
So the strategies are not only looking at, what is it that you need to do and how are we going to measure that, but who are the audiences and what do we got to say specifically to that audience to get to move the needle with them and to get them to want to buy? What's the problem that we're going to solve for them? And so if you haven't done that exercise, just sit down and write down 3, pick your top 3, whatever they are, and talk to your team, find out what they think too, because it's important not just to get the perspective from the top, but the people who deal with the day-to-day need to have some input into this. But who are the top 3 that you have the most potential to improve your sales with? So it may be you're doing really well with one group right now, but that might not be the one you need to market to, because if you're doing really well, there might be more opportunity with another group that's present, but that you're not doing well with. So think about it from that perspective too. Pick your top 3 that have the most potential for new sales, identify them, give them a name, and then write down everything you know about them, what their problem is, and how you solve that problem. And if you look at your marketing from that perspective, it's going to make things a whole lot easier.
And just to pick up on something you said earlier, is it Mike or Mark Stelzner?
Mike Stelzner.
Mike Stelzner. I listened to his podcast this past weekend, and he said that one of the most valuable things you could do is go out and talk to your audience, speak to your customers. So to kind of pick up on these top 3 that you were just mentioning, talk to your top 3 customers in those verticals. What is on their mind? What bothers them? What pain do they feel? What are the issues they're dealing with? And when you can get it straight from the horse's mouth and then incorporate that into your strategic plan, I think that would be very valuable too.
Yeah. So my monthly strategy meetings with my clients, where I'm serving as their chief marketing officer, are some of the most useful meetings I have all month for me professionally, because the questions they ask and the things that they've heard about and the things that they've seen online are sometimes helping me learn even more about what's going on. So by having those regular touch bases with my clients, I'm learning like, oh, this is the problem they're seeing, or this is why they're asking me these weird questions about this because they read this blog post or whatever. This is why all of a sudden it's so important for them to see an increase in marketing on their website or new sales on their website or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, you learn a whole bunch, not only about your clients, but also about what's going on in their world, because as an agency owner, I am a small business owner, but the stuff that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis is very different than my client who owns a restaurant that's a farm to table place versus my client who is like a, boutique dermatologist in Manhattan, or my client that is, whatever. Like, they all have different problems. And the more I can learn about those problems from regular communication with them, the better off I am. So yeah, don't, keep your best customers close, talk to them often, and incentivize them to keep coming back. Give them free stuff, even if they're going to buy it anyways, because let them know that they're important to you, so that when you do have questions for them, they're going to take the time to answer them.
Great. So a good conversation. If somebody who's watching or listening to this wanted to get in touch with you, how's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch with me is on Twitter. Personally, I am at the Ed Perry, so THEEDPERRY. You can also check us out on Twitter at the Beacon Agency, at Beacon Agency. Our website is www.beacon.agency. And you can email me, ed@beaconagency.net. And would love to hear from you if you have any questions, if you are looking to get strategy or you're looking to improve your marketing. I'd love to have a chat with you. And if you just have questions about any of the things that we talked about today, happy to answer them.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Great conversation. Appreciate being on. My name is Gordon Coyle. If you have an interesting story that you'd like to tell on this podcast, I'll put my contact info in the show notes as well as, and I'll put all of Ed's contact in there as well in case you're listening to this. So you can reach out to either of us. But if you have an interesting story that you'd like to tell on this podcast, reach out to me. Let's have a conversation and let's get you on the show. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, Gordon.
You bet.
That's it for this week's episode of the New York Business Leaders Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. In the meantime, find more interviews and resources at nybusinessleaders.com.